Hey guys, it's Coach Scaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. This is another interview style podcast today. We got a longtime buddy and friend, Matt Ellis, on the line today. How you doing today, Matt?
Doing good, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
So in beautiful Rhode Island, it's a Strong Island's close cousin.
Yes, the armpit of New England. We are in the middle of the woods.
But so Matt has a gym, Primal Athletic Training Center, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We actually just changed the name about a week ago. It's Primal Training Center now. We got rid of the athlete.
Right. Yeah, there you go. So I want to just really quick, and we'll kind of get into the conversation. But just for the people that maybe don't know who you are, can you just tell us a little bit about like who you are, what you got going on right now?
Yeah. So I've been a gym owner now for 9 years. Started Primal in 2010. Before that, I owned another gym for a little while that didn't work out. And then about 7 years prior to that, I worked for a company called MF Athletic. Perform Better is how most of the people listening to this will kind of know us. It's their parent company. So I did track and field sales for their track and field side, equipment sales for their Perform Better side, spoke at seminars and track and field clinics and camps and did that whole thing for 7 years. Phone salesman, designed equipment, all that. But got tired of sitting behind a cubicle for 7 years and had a bunch of people walking in off the street that needed coaching and that needed training and turning people away for 7 years. I finally decided to make a business out of it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things I want to kind of talk to you about. But first, I kind of want to rewind a little bit and maybe just talk about like your own personal kind of athletic career. Like how did you kind of get involved with strength training?
Yep.
Like did you do any sports like kind of growing up, and then what kind of got you into the gym like initially?
Yeah, so growing up, I did a lot of the typical sports. I played baseball, when I was younger, basketball all throughout from pretty much second grade until sophomore year of high school. And when I got to high school, I started doing track. And the way that it happened basically was that I got cut from the basketball team. And the track and field coach was there and said, we want you to do track. And I said, I'm not fast. And he said, we want you to throw. And I said, throw what? I never heard of it before, and I was kind of devastated that I got cut from the basketball team. And I went home and pretty much told my mom on the ride home what happened. And she said, talk about it with your father. And I talked about it with my dad when I got home. And he knew all about it because he did it in high school. And one of the guys who I kind of call my uncle, one of my dad's best friends, played football for the Steelers back in the 70s and threw shot put and discus, and they knew about it. So I turned into a track kid, and, you do shot and discus, you got to lift weights. So that's how I got into lifting weights and started in high school. Pretty typical story.
Yeah, and for the people listening that maybe are a little unfamiliar with the sport of track and field, if maybe you can describe a little bit like some of the demands of like the shot put and the discus, maybe some of the similarities in discus. And I just know from experience, like, guys like kind of like Chad Smith come to mind. I'm sure there's like a bunch of other guys. I want to maybe even what's his face? Gary Frank. I think
Gary Frank was a very good thrower. Yep,
and
Olympian.
Obviously one of like the best like powerlifters of all time as far as an equipped lifting. One of the first men to kind of hit a couple, I think 26, 27, 2800 or something like that in multiply lifting. So there's a lot of strong throwers out there,
Absolutely.
Even by powerlifting standards. So maybe you can just talk about some of the demands of the sport, because like I said, for those that don't know, like Matt's definitely like an expert. Definitely one of the best in the Northeast, maybe, and even in the country as far as for coaching throwers and getting them ready for competition, as far as getting them stronger. So can you just tell us a little bit about like what are some of the demands? Because obviously, I guess a shot put could be anywhere from like 12 to 16 pounds, depending on. So it's like not super heavy, but you still need like a lot of strength to kind of use these implements. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so track and field is one of those sports where it's a individual sport, but you're part of a team. Kind of like a golf team, a wrestling team, a swimming team. It's a bunch of individual events, and they all get scored together. So the demands of shot and discus, and then here in Rhode Island we do the javelin and the hammer throw as well, which the hammer is basically a shot put on a wire. If you've never seen that, and we also have an indoor hammer, which is called the weight, 20 pound for the girls and 25 pound for the boys. So there's a lot of different weights, similar kind of to Highland Games, but the demands are basically it's an explosive, powerful movement. So the biggest kind of circle that you throw out of is a discus circle, which is just over 8 feet. So you don't really have to move a long distance like a sprinter, but you've got to be extremely explosive, extremely quick, extremely powerful, but you've got to be really strong as well because in college the shot put is 16 pounds. The discus is 2 kilos, which is 4.4 pounds. Um, even the indoor weight that you use during the winter season for men is 35 pounds. And guys are throwing that 60, 70 plus feet. So it's about being quick, explosive. There's a lot of strength involved, but you've got to be able to turn that strength into speed and peak correctly for the end of the year.
Yeah, and like I said, I've seen at least some videos online of some of these throwers really moving some big weights. So it's pretty impressive to see like kind of the difference between what they kind of do in the weight room and then what they're able to kind of do on the field. So there's still like obviously maybe it's not always the people that are listening to this, but in the kind of the general public, I think there's still like a lot of myths and about like strength training for athletes, and obviously each sport's going to be a little bit different. There's obviously a diminishing return. So obviously if someone's like a marathon runner or like a tennis player, like getting them to like a 500-pound bench press, obviously there may be better use of their time. There's going to be a point of diminishing return at some point, but. Yep. What are some like the common like myths that maybe you hear when you have like parents or kids come in that you need to kind of dispel, and what are some trends that you've seen? I know like I've worked with a lot of football players and wrestlers, and there's kind of like norms you kind of see. I know like in wrestling for me, if someone gets to the point where maybe they're like deadlifting like two to 2.5 times their body weight, and they're able to do like 20 chin-ups. If they're like a heavyweight wrestler, maybe 10 chin-ups. There's kind of certain trends you'll kind of see. As far as strength and like relative strength, as far as what they need to like perform at a high level. So I noticed that like everyone that was kind of all state was kind of able to like hit 2 times body weight deadlift for like a wrestler. They're able to hit like 20 chin ups and things like that. That was kind of like a norm. So do you see any kind of norms, and do you see like is there any kind of like major kind of mistakes that you kind of still see kids making, or that are kind of myths that are out there for like strength training for athletes?
Yeah, I mean I think just athletes in general. My thing is, and this is tough to say coming from the company that I used to work for, which they're like the equipment suppliers for the
leaders,
the leaders in like functional training, functional fitness. But a lot of that stuff, I think, really doesn't apply that much at the younger level. Our specialty here at Primal is middle school and high school kids. And, you've got a middle school boy, say 8th grade boy, who can barely do 10 push-ups with good form. He's somebody who needs to get stronger. He needs to work a little bit more on the general side of things, rather than going toward a specific, function for him is going to be strength.
So let's say like he's a middle school thrower. So just for people kind of, because obviously we kind of know we've thrown out these terms that maybe they meant. So like obviously, so why would it be like a push-up be considered like a general means of training versus like obviously like what's the difference between like a specific skill and like a general like means of training? Like what's the difference between that?
Yeah, so I mean a specific skill with something like the shot put. One of the like a boy's high school shot put is 12 pounds. So a lot of times what you'll see is things that resemble drills for shot put. Like shot put coaches will always argue what's better, incline bench or flat bench. And it's like it doesn't really matter too much. Yeah, you're kind of splitting hairs at that point. Or they'll argue, well, maybe you should train with a little bit of an underweight shot put, like use the 11 pound, the 5 kilo, because it's a little bit lighter for speed. Use the 6 kilo, which is 13.2, because it's a little bit heavier for strength. But you got a kid who, can barely do 10 push-ups. It's like that's a little bit too much on the spectrum of specific when someone who's brand new needs a little bit more general. And I think that's really the big thing is specificity is needed with form, with technique, with how the actual sport is done, but you don't have to get too muddied with this kind of general specific hybrid of underweight and overweight and bands and tubing and incline versus flat or dumbbell versus barbell. People start to kind of major in the minors and they start to nitpick that stuff. It's really not necessary.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches too, they might focus too much on like what tool is best, whether it's a barbell or a kettlebell or body weight, and at the end of the day, just getting a younger kid just to do some resistance training, some strength training is great.
Yeah.
And as long as they're getting generally strong, it's going to provide a bigger foundation for their kind of sport specific skill or whatever if they need to have more speed and power. So I think that's a really good take home point.
Yeah.
And I think like in general, like when someone kind of comes in brand new, like we always say, like I think it might have been like Dave Tage said, like you can't like flex bone kind of thing.
You can't tone bone, you can't flex bone.
Exactly. So it's kind of like trying to like drive a car without an engine. So if they don't have that kind of foundational strength,
right.
If they don't have any muscle, there's going to be no potential for speed and power. So that's kind of be your strength, and hypertrophy is going to be kind of the foundation for any kind of athletic training program. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the best example I can give is we have a baseball player here. He just finished his junior year. His team took second in the state for Division I, and he's a pitcher. He didn't pitch in high school, but he pitches for all of his other teams. Sure. And when he goes to college showcases and stuff like that, he's a pitcher. Before he started training with us, he was throwing in the mid to high 70s. I think he topped out around 78, 79. Trained with us throughout the baseball season, trained with us over the winter, in the fall, and last summer. And he just got picked up, just got looked at and signed to a Division I school next year because the last seminar test day kind of combine thing for baseball, showcase, that's the word I'm looking for. He topped out at 86 on the mound. So now he's got we didn't do any baseball specific stuff. We squatted, we worked on a lot of strength, a lot of core strength, a lot of his hip strength, a lot of deadlifting, a lot of squatting, got him a lot stronger. We didn't mess with his throwing form or technique. We didn't do anything specific with overweight baseballs, bands, tubing. We got his shoulders really strong and bulletproof, a lot of face pulls, a lot of stuff like that to really improve the strength in the shoulder. Legs strong, hips strong. He's throwing, 7, 8, 9 miles an hour faster than he was a year ago. Boom, he gets picked up by a Division I school.
Yeah, I think a good take-home point, so like Matt mentioned a lot of exercises, so like something like squatting and deadlifting, there's a lot of lower body strength and there's a lot of what kind of strength coaches would consider like posterior chain, so the glutes, the hamstrings, the low back, upper back. Getting that whole back side of the body strong is going to allow the athlete to propel themselves forward. So whether that be jumping, running, sprinting, cutting, etc. So getting all those muscles stronger is going to allow them to have more potential force production. If they can produce more force into the ground, there's going to be more potential for, like I said, for them to excel like on the field with whatever their sport is. So I think that's a really good point.
Especially a sport like baseball is not a endurance sport. No, it's not like really, soccer, basketball. It's you throw the ball one time really fast, really explosive, get about 20, 30 seconds rest, you do it again.
So just from experience, because we've been friends for a while, and I've seen like you've had some really, really strong athletes come through your doors. I think I don't want to say maybe some of your college throwers, maybe they're squatting like 600, they're deadlifting 600 plus in the trap bar. When is there a point where like the athlete, because obviously most of the time when an athlete walks through either of our doors or your doors, they probably need to get stronger, number one. But yes. Is there a point where like they're strong enough, and like when do you kind of know, like when is there a point of diminishing return, and when should the athlete start to maybe focus a little bit more, less on general training and a little bit more on practicing the sport specific skill, or a little bit more on maybe speed work or plyos and things like that? Like where do you kind of draw the line there?
Yeah, it's kind of different for everybody. We definitely do have to draw the line a lot of times, especially with our college athletes that have been with us since they were maybe 9th grade, 10th grade.
Big foundation already.
Yeah, they've got the huge foundation. I mean, if we have a high school shot putter that can bench press in the low 300 pounds.
So maybe it's like 1.5 times body weight or something like that, like in that range.
Yeah.
Ballpark.
Yep, right around 1.5 body weight for bench press. A little more than 2 times body weight squat. Those are the guys who have been, really good for us. But at the same time, too, if you start to notice that they're slowing down,
the performance on the field, maybe, yeah.
Absolutely, because you can take, a average-sized thrower, average-sized strength with really good speed, really good technique, really explosive. They're going to beat a big, strong guy every day of the week if the big, strong guy's technique is not good and if they're not fast. So speed kills, because the ball only weighs 12 pounds in high school. it's not super heavy. Imagine a 12-pound medicine ball. You don't have to, squat 400 or 500 pounds to throw a 12-pound medicine ball far if you're really, really fast instead. So you've got to kind of find that balance. But Bondarchuk, who I know is a name you recognize, but Anatoly Bondarchuk has his books that have been translated and things out there now where he actually has the diminishing returns kind of mapped out and figured out. And it's something like, with the Olympic throwers, you're at like a 500-pound bench press, 450 to 500-pound bench press.
Which is very strong.
Which is very strong,
so
yeah.
That's why I think it's a good point. Maybe throw out a couple of what are they cleaning? What are they? Because I know like some of those guys are really throwing around some.
Yeah, cleans are in the, I think, 200 or so kilo area, like 400 plus.
So it's not light.
Yeah, it's not light,
So,
but it's not like they could be like a number one power lifter in the world either. The thing that I always tell my throwers is that
strong for your sport.
Yeah, you got to be strong for your sport, and you got to be explosive for your sport too. Where, in college we did a lot of our warming up and a lot of our workouts with the sprinters, even though we were throwers. And my sprints coach would make us come out of starting blocks just like a sprinter.
Working your speed also, yeah.
Yeah, me and one other thrower were the two fastest kids on the team for about 15 meters. And then everybody else would just blast right past us. But we were stronger and more explosive, but we could only do it for about 10 to 15 meters. And then we would start to slow down. So you just got to figure out kind of the combination. If you're way too strong and you're really slow, get faster. It's like you got to improve whatever you suck at.
So I think just some take-home points for that. So I know, like, for me personally, and I'm sure, like, Matt has got similar numbers or similar, for me, like, I worked with a lot of high school football and wrestlers. And on the female side, I worked with a lot of collegiate softball and soccer and lacrosse. So we kind of find, like, and Matt, you can maybe comment if you've seen some trends as well. If someone's like a 200-pound like athlete, they're a male like wrestler. If they're like, we say, if you're like a 3, 4, 5 guy, if you got like a 300-pound bench, 400-pound squat, 500-pound deadlift, that's probably like strong enough. Not to say that we want to get weaker, but we want to at least maintain that strength. And then maybe we're going to work more on power, speed. So maybe doing more jumping, medicine ball throws. Maybe focus a little bit more on chin-ups. For wrestlers, we really liked weighted rope climbs as an exercise, and maybe a little bit more single leg work at that point.
Yep.
And then for like our females, that maybe say about like a $145, if they could bench like 130, 135, deadlift 275 to 300, and maybe squat 200, 225. That's like pretty strong for like a soccer player and stuff. And there's going to be a point where, getting them the amount of training resources that you're going to need to kind of give them to get a 10-pound PR on a deadlift, maybe that time and energy can be better spent to either practicing their sport or doing more plyos or doing more medicine ball work.
Mm-hmm.
But to Matt's point again, like we talked about some of these elite throwers that their average bench press is 500 pounds. The average person that walks into our doors, they're probably going to, if you had to flip a coin and kind of guess, like most people are going to need to get stronger.
Absolutely.
But there's definitely a point, especially some of our athletes that we've worked with, we've been with us for 2, 3, even 4 years sometimes, and there's going to be a point where it's like, okay, like we can check that strength box off. So maybe if you want to kind of comment on some of that, or just kind of if you see anything like maybe for like your throwing sports or track and field, any trends that you see or kind of indicator lifts that you like to kind of see with your because I know it's different depending on the sport and like what, but
yeah,
any comments on that?
It's funny because when you're talking, the one thing I think of is the conjugate method, and traditionally the conjugate method, you've got kind of 2 days that are maximum effort strength and 2 days that are speed based, and a lot of track and field throwers do not like the conjugate method, not because they don't like the method, but because it doesn't always work for them. And that's because they do a very explosive sport. So to give you an idea, one of our top throwers, if you were to apply the typical kind of conjugate 50% plus 25% in bands, you could send him, that's going to move the same speed as if you put 75% plus 25% bands.
They're efficient at like moving
super efficient at moving quickly. So a lot of times throwers don't need to get really, really fast because they're already really, really fast. The same way too, maybe a volleyball player who can jump through the ceiling, you don't have to really work on jumping with him because they jump all the time and naturally, because they've chosen their sport, can jump really well. A lot of times with throwers, you don't need a ton of speed based or explosive based work because they're doing speed and explosive based movements for their actual sport. Um, Same way that like a sprinter, for example, if you were a short sprinter, you should be doing a lot of heavier weight and not doing longer distance runs because it's just not the longer distance runs aren't going to benefit a short sprinter, but short sprints might benefit a longer distance runner. You got to kind of do the things that you don't normally do. Um, but throwers that are already super explosive and really quick, just naturally really fast, you don't really need to do a ton of speed work with if they're not strong. Get them stronger, and they're typically going to get even faster.
So maybe with those guys, maybe if you were doing like a typical West Side split, maybe you'd kind of increase the bar weight or the intensity like on the dynamic
Absolutely.
day. So you kind of work on their, so instead of working like speed strength, be more of like a strength speed day. So you're still kind of, so you're going to increase that percentage a little bit. So it's a little bit kind of work on their weak point. So, and I think there's a couple of different things. So just really quick, and I want to get back to the West Side method a little bit more, but I also wanted to also highlight too, I think, so the principle that kind of Matt was talking about also is called dynamic correspondence. So basically, you want to utilize movements that are kind of be specific to like the velocity, the vector, the speed, and the weight of like the competition like movements or the competition skill, and that's going to have a higher transfer to the sport. So in the case of like a shot, but obviously doing like you could correct me if I'm wrong with that. So like just like a weighted throw without like the spin or the glide would be something very specific because it's obviously using the similar weight, that sort of thing.
Yep.
A medicine ball throw would also be pretty close, but not quite because it's a similar kind of weight and more explosive. And then like a speed squat with bands, and then eventually like a heavy squat would be a little bit further down the line. So
yes.
So when you're getting closer to a competition season or doing off-season training or trying to focus on strengths and weaknesses, it's kind of important to think about like those rules.